Welcome back to the FPL video and podcast. This will be my team selection for Game Week 26 with only one free transfer, and this will be the last game week where my assistant manager is active. I'll be discussing how my chosen manager has done over the last couple of weeks and some potential plans of moving him on if needed, as well as player transfers, what we're used to in Fantasy Premier League. Like the video if you enjoy it or find it insightful, and subscribe to the channel. We hit 32 subscribers during the Tuesday deadline stream for UCL Fantasy, so thank you very much for your support. 33,000 is the next objective, and you can also follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, the Discord server, and join the FPL League, which you can see on screen, and the code will be pretty much in all of my videos and also in the description, so it's very easy to join one of the biggest FPL mini leagues in the world. And I also would appreciate you checking the other links like my Patreon, championships, and much more. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. As usual, I'll start off with a review of the previous game week, and I have to say Double Gameweek 25 wasn't too shabby in the end. A lot of different chips flying around like the assistant manager and the triple captain, but between the sticks I had Sells in goal, and he has been fairly disappointing since I've brought him in. Over the last 4 game weeks, only one clean sheet, which came in that 7-0 win against Brighton, and the clean sheet itself was a bit fortuitous when Danny Welbeck hit the crossbar and it almost went over the line. But this week, Sells made 6 saves and got 3 points overall in a 2-1 defeat against Fulham, and Jordan Pickford got the same tally with 5 saves instead and only 1 goal conceded in his case. And I think both Sells and Pickford are the best goalkeepers in FPL, but David Raya might have something to say about that. He is creeping up on both of them, and it could be a very interesting battle in terms of who comes out on top in the goalkeeper position. As for my defensive line, it was a bit underwhelming, to be honest. Only one player carried it in Trent Alexander-Arnold. He actually did very well in the second game, getting the equaliser with a deflected goal, a bit fortuitous, but you always take a deflected goal. It's part of football. And in the first game, a lot of luck here because Trent was subbed off just before Liverpool conceded against Wolves, and Matheus Cunha scored a brilliant goal from outside the box. But Liverpool got 4 points on the board in this double game week, and Trent Alexander-Arnold did his job with returns in both matches. But I have to say, a lot of luck was involved in Trent's returns, especially for those that went for Konate, Van Dijk or Alisson. You would probably feel a little bit hard done by if you didn't go for Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. As for Robinson and Mikalenko, they both blanked, and I was expecting something from at least one of these defenders, but I had someone on my bench who outscored both of them combined, and you never would have expected the name in question. But FPL and football can be a funny game. As for the midfield, pretty much the same story. One player carrying it, and that's Mohamed Salah, who has been the best FPL asset by some distance. I mean, the season he's having, he's on course of having the greatest Premier League campaign of all time, and we've had some incredible ones like Luis Suarez over a decade ago, Thierry Henry on multiple occasions, Cristiano Ronaldo in his first Ballon d'Or winning season. But Mohamed Salah is right up there, and if he continues this, it's going to go down in folklore, and Liverpool have to win the Premier League title for him, in my opinion, because he is doing everything possible to get the Reds over the line. Cole Palmer blanked on Friday night against Brighton, and a lot of people are looking to sell, but as covered in my recent videos and podcasts, I think that would be a major mistake, especially with Southampton and Leicester at home over the next 3 game weeks. Now, you could say something similar about Mbeumo, who faces Leicester City away next. You don't want to sell him when he's got such an appealing fixture. Even Visser up front is a bit applicable in terms of that situation, but I think Mbeumo has been disappointing recently. Yeah, it's still worth keeping him for the next couple of weeks, but I certainly understand the temptation to break away from the template and sell the likes of Mbeumo and Palmer and diversify your midfield with low-owned differentials and maybe budget players who can make all the difference. So I'm not completely against that, but in the case of Cole Palmer for sure, I would definitely be keeping him for the next 3 game weeks, then reassessing. But ultimately, they both blanked, and the same goes for my new signing Morgan Rogers, who got 2 appearance points in both matches in Double Gameweek 25, involved in the celebrations, and he should have got a big return against Ipswich Town. He had so many big chances, but the goalkeeper Palmer on that day was terrific, and Aston Villa were held to a 1-1 draw in the first game of Double Gameweek 25. Marcus Rashford came off the bench and got an assist in that particular game, but it was Ollie Watkins up front who was the star of the Aston Villa team. As for Semenyo, he got booked but got an assist against Southampton, so it could have been worse. I don't have the grace of records of Semenyo when he's in my FPL team. In fact, the only 2 times he's returned for me is against Southampton back in Game Week 6 when I bought him on the wildcard, and now in Game Week 25 against the same opposition. So we've come full circle, but the amount of big returns he has produced on my bench has been very frustrating, to say the least. But let's complete this team with the forward line. Chris Wood doing what he does best, scoring a goal and getting maximum bonus points. Also a bit lucky with this one because there was a slight deflection, but everything Chris Wood touches right now turns to gold. It wasn't enough to get Nottingham Forest a crucial victory, but Fulham are a decent side, and I think Chris Wood is fixture-proof, so even against Newcastle away, Arsenal, Man City at home, in the next 3 game weeks, I'd be shocked if Chris Wood blanked in all 3 Premier League matches. And Isak has blanked yet again in the Premier League, and I think those that went from him to Watkins have done an absolute masterstroke there, but I have to say with Isak, in the long term, I would still rather keep him than Anthony Gordon, and that's why I decided to keep Alexander Isak, and I bought Morgan Rogers in the first place. Now, I could see this scenario where a lot of people sell Morgan Rogers in Game Week 26 and he produces a return against Chelsea, but having said that, Aston Villa have had this kind of record this season of playing in midweek, particularly in the Champions League, and then really struggling over the weekend. So I think Chelsea could get a result at Villa Park, despite the fact that Aston Villa are currently the better team in form. Both of them have dropped a lot of points recently, and across all competitions, they aren't getting as many victories as they were towards the beginning of this season, but that should be a great game, and you can see my predictions in the best wildcard team video and also in the deadline stream tomorrow. But let's actually complete this team with my assistant manager. Arne Slot got 13 points across both games, and Unai Emery outscored him by 1 solitary point, but it goes to show how important table bonus is, because Unai Emery got a draw. In fact, he got 2 draws in Double Gameweek 25, one of them against Ipswich Town, and yet because of the table bonus, he has outscored Arne Slot by 1 point. So those that went for David Moyes in Game Week 24 and then Unai Emery have done really well with the assistant managership, and now it's about finishing in style in Game Week 26, and this will be the biggest challenge in my opinion. Do you go safe and maybe go for Mikel Arteta or Iraola, you could say, with the most appealing fixtures in Game Week 26, or go for the table bonus opportunities with McKenna against Tottenham Hotspur, or perhaps Oliver Glasner, who is very popular? I put out a poll on my channel and he is by far the most popular choice with almost half of the votes there, and you've got plenty more. Maybe Ruud van Nistelrooy for table bonus. If not, you stick with what you have in Arne Slot. Maybe some of you have stuck with David Moyes from the beginning and didn't make a transfer. He got another win on the board for Everton as they've moved up the Premier League table once again. Maybe you stick with Unai Emery, for example. There are so many different ways of playing the game right now, which is great to see. And with the assistant manager, we're seeing real variance and also different options being selected. And I'll discuss this in the next section with the transfer plans and, of course, with my provisional team selection. As for my bench, though, it was quite disappointing, you could say. The only thing I'd probably argue is that Veltman getting a clean sheet on Friday night was unexpected. I thought Chelsea would score, and he outscored 2 of my defenders in Robinson and Mikalenko combined, but the rest blanked, and you don't want to see bench points regardless. But I've got Unai, who's out for several weeks, as reported on this channel already, and I put Levi Colwill above Veltman, so I'm a bit lucky there that Colwill isn't coming off the bench for me, because that would have been a terrible decision from my part. But with the captaincy, I got Salah. It's completely spot on. It's nothing to celebrate because everyone is captaining the Egyptian right now. With his current form, you need a great reason to go against him. But I think Game Week 26 offers a decent opportunity to go against him, and I've rarely said that in the last couple of months. Valdemaris, my backup goalkeeper, will no longer start for them as Flecken returned from injury, but that's something that's not really too surprising anyway. So my bench needs a bit of bolstering, but the primary focus is the starting 11 and building towards future blanks and doubles like Game Week 29, Game Week 32, 33, and also until the rest of the season. But I've still got the wild card in my back pocket, and the same goes for the bench boost. The triple captain and the assistant manager have all been used by me, and I've still got a free hit as well to navigate these blanks and doubles. So I got 97 points in the end, not too shabby. Only a few players really carried my team in Trent Alexander-Arnold, Salah, and Chris Wood. The rest were fairly disappointing, despite the fact that Semenyo got an assist and Rogers got 4 points by basically just turning up and doing his thing. Arne Slot, of course, got 13 points, which isn't too bad, but at the same time, I think Moyes and Emery outscored him quite comfortably in the end. You might have used an extra free transfer, but there are so many different variables to go into the fact of which one or which method is better. For example, if you went for the Emery route, did you keep Cody Gakpo, for example? I'm happy I sold him last week. He missed both matches in Game Week 25, and in Game Week 24, he only got 7 points with those 2 away games against Bournemouth and Everton by winning a penalty with no goals or actual assists being put on the board. But my rank has actually gone up a little bit to 380,000. So it's progress. I'm getting a few green arrows all of a sudden. I'm building some momentum, but I still want to do more and surpass my rank from last season, which was the worst I've ever done. But I still think going into the top 100k would be a solid end to this season. It will be very difficult, but with the chips I've got left and my transfer plans, I'm fairly confident that it's still possible. But let's delve straight into that because there are so many different avenues for me with my Gameweek 26 squad, and I think I could really build a solid platform for the long term. As for prices, not much has really changed in the last couple of days. In fact, overnight, Emery is the only player to have risen in price. And as for my team, I've got a bit of value tied up in the likes of Dissect, Semenyo, and a few others here and there. We could see price falls for the likes of Cole Palmer and Alexander Isak actually, but even with Chris Wood, who I sold at one stage and then bought him back in, he has 7.1 million now, and I actually got decent team value overall, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. But prices is only one element of the game. Remember, with assistant managers, there will be no price changes from now until the end of the season. So what you see is what you get. Arne slot is one of 5 managers at 1.5 million, which makes it very easy for me to switch to anybody I want if he is indeed on the chopping board. And I have to say, it might be a good opportunity to go against him. But one transfer I'm considering with normal players is Morgan Rogers out for Mitoma, who faces Southampton away next. And in the reverse fixture, it was a 1-1 draw. Mitoma got 10 points by scoring Brighton's only goal, and he is actually projected to rise to 6.4 million either tonight, on Thursday, if not on Friday. But we'll wait and see if it happens before the deadline, and be sure to tune in for that stream tomorrow. It should be very interesting to say the least. But that isn't the only move I'm considering, because Morgan Rogers could also be sold for Justin Kluivert, and I would double up on the Cherries midfield. Danga Owatara will be an outside consideration. He's even cheaper than Kluivert and playing down the middle. But the Dutchman is on penalties, and he's also getting close to 90 minutes in most game weeks nowadays. Not in 25, to be fair. He got around 76 minutes of game time, but I think Kluivert is probably the best Bournemouth midfielder in the long term, and I could see Danga Owatara rotating when the likes of Evanilson, and of course Tavernier is now back. He scored this weekend, so that could also factor into his minutes. But with Kluivert, I would have no such concerns. Either way, both of them are great investments. I would just argue that Kluivert is worth the extra millions because he gives you that security in the next couple of months. But I might even keep Morgan Rogers in the end and focus my attention elsewhere. Unai is injured after all, and I could sell him to Matheus Cunha as I've got 2.1 million in the bank. I might even want to take a punt on Marmoush, for example, who I think could be a nice purchase, more so around Gameweek 27 or 29. I'm not a big fan of that Liverpool fixture, despite their frailties in recent game weeks, and Unai is out for several game weeks, of course. Matheus Cunha scored against Liverpool just recently. It's Bournemouth away next, then Fulham at home, and afterwards you've got excellent fixtures for Wolves, which includes Southampton away in blank Gameweek 29. So if I were to make a forward transfer, Matheus Cunha is by far the most likely acquisition for my team. And I could also reinforce my defensive line with Levi Colwill to Gabriel because I've got the money in the bank to do so, albeit it leaves me with pretty much nothing in the bank afterwards. But remember, I've got Arne slot in my team, and once the assistant manager chip is over for me, that money goes back into my squad, so I've still got a lot of leeway in future game weeks and also for future moves. But I think Gabriel is the primary target in that defensive line, and he does face Chelsea in blank Gameweek 29 as well. But I have to say, the most likely move for me will be a manager transfer. Oliver Glasner would be the kind of punt if I want to go very risky and target table bonus. But I have to say, Crystal Palace, despite the fact they're unbeaten in Premier League away matches since Gameweek 8, I would argue that those away games were easy on paper, and with some tougher games coming up on their travels, you could see more drop points for the Eagles. But you just need a draw to get those table bonus, and of course a victory would make it a massive return there for those that invest in Oliver Glasner. You've also got Ruud van Nistelrooy to consider against Brentford, and the other one is McKenna against Tottenham Hotspur. Ipswich Town have beaten Tottenham 4 times in a row, dating back to 2000, and could they make it 5 in a row? It's definitely possible, but I'm not quite convinced about that, and ultimately it's high risk, high reward for a reason. So if I decide to go safe and pick the most likely kind of winner in Gameweek 26, I'd maybe argue Mikel Arteta and Arsenal is the team to invest in. But with their blunt attacking line, you could still point towards the other kind of side of the argument and say West Ham could go to the Emirates and win again. They did it last season, and although their overall record against Arsenal is terrible, I still think the Hammers can cause some problems. They've got some quality attackers themselves. Kudus hasn't had a good season, but he's got the quality to really punish Arsenal. And then you've got Jarrod Bowen, who has a decent record against the Gunners. But what about keeping Arne slot? Is that a possibility? I think it's not too shabby, because in terms of my prediction for that game, I said originally 2-2. And let's say that comes into fruition, for example, you get 3 points for a draw and then 2 points for scoring goals. So that's 5 points overall. For those looking to take hits for a manager and selling slot to Arteta, is that really worth it? Let's say Arsenal win 2-0. They get 6 points for a win, 2 points for the goals, and then 2 for the clean sheet. That's 10 points. So you compare the slot 5-pointer with a 2-2 draw to Arteta's 2-0 win, and if you take the hit, you gain 1 point overall. So in such circumstances, I don't think hits are really worth it, because that's kind of like a high risk and a low reward. That's the way I would be looking at it. So with manager transfers, maybe try to use free transfers if possible, or keep what you have. That could be Arne slot, Unai Emery, or perhaps even with David Moyes, who has been very solid since he has come into the Premier League once again. But I have to say Arteta would be the safe bet for me and the most likely transfer for my Gameweek 26 team. Now, would I rule out the possibility of taking a -4 hit? Not necessarily, but this is how my team would line up in Gameweek 26. With Sells in goal, facing Newcastle away, I'm not too confident of a clean sheet here, but Nottingham Forest can surprise you, and they keep these clean sheets when you least expect them to, and Sells is the highest scoring goalkeeper for a reason. As for my defensive line, I've got Trent away to Man City, and also Veltman facing Southampton. Can he finally return while in my team? Probably not, and I think Southampton will probably get a goal there, but Veltman has returned once in my starting 11 against Brentford, and what I like about him is when Brighton keep a clean sheet, he can get bonus points, but the problem with that is Brighton don't keep too many clean sheets overall, although they did get one against Chelsea last week, and Veltman was nowhere near the bonus, but I think generally speaking, he's probably better for that metric compared to other Brighton defenders. And Robinson is facing Crystal Palace at home, who have a great away record, and I think Fulham will concede. But what you've got with Robinson is the attacking potential. 10 fantasy assists this season is ridiculous. A bit of luck, you could say, with some of them, but you need it in terms of getting FPL points at times, and Robinson has arguably been the best left-back in the Premier League this season, alongside Milos Kerkez. My midfield includes the likes of Salah, Palmer, Mbeumo, Rodgers and Semenyo, but I wouldn't rule out making a manager transfer and also offloading Morgan Rodgers to the likes of Matoma. I've got the funds available to do it, and I'm not completely against the -4 hit, but after Gameweek 26, I have to say my plan will be to roll transfers if possible, and then navigate blank Gameweek 29 without the use of the free hit. But I'm trying to keep my options open, and nothing is penciled in for me at the moment, but I think there are windows in terms of using these different chips, and in my case, I've got the wildcard, free hit and bench boost, so I could see myself using the wildcard between Gameweek 30 and 34, and the bench boost in either Gameweek 33 or 36, and then the free hit in 29, perhaps even in Double Gameweek, like 32 for example, because I've only got one Newcastle player and no one from Crystal Palace, so maybe my transfers after Gameweek 26 will be directed at those sort of players, and if that's the case, I could then free hit in Gameweek 29. So as you can see, I've kind of keeping my options open and not committing to one strategy just yet, but I've got a clear idea about the windows of each chip and when they're going to be used. So Salah's facing Man City away. He remains a top captaincy contender. Cole Palmer is almost a forgotten man at this point, but I would not be selling him with his upcoming fixtures. Brian Mbeumo facing Leicester away next. It was a 4-1 win for Brentford in the last game, but Mbeumo blanked, and it was Kevin Schade scoring a hat-trick, and I could see Visser outscoring Mbeumo this week, but I hope that isn't the case. Morgan Rodgers has been disappointing with 4 consecutive blanks, and he has been producing in the FA Cup and Champions League, but nothing in FPL, so we need to see an upturn in form. He's going to be sold in droves in the next couple of weeks, but I think he can do something against Chelsea, despite the fact the Blues have a big advantage in terms of rest. So they've got 8 days between both of matches against Brighton and Aston Villa, whilst the Villains only have a 3-day break essentially. So that could play into Chelsea's hands, and I would expect both teams to score. Hopefully Palmer and Rodgers can be the ones to do it. And Antoine Semenyo facing Wolves at home, I'm starting him consistently now. Let's see if he can produce some big returns like he did when he was on my bench. But let's complete this team with 2 forwards in Chris Wood and Isak. Nothing has changed from last week. Unai is still injured and is currently in my squad still. third on my bench, as you'll see very shortly. But with the assistant manager, I am looking to make a change, and Mikel Arteta is currently the most likely transfer in. But if I want to go for the table bonus, it will be Glasner, Ruud van Nistelrooy, or McKenna. And I think maybe McKenna is more likely than Van Nistelrooy, but Glasner will be top in terms of those punts, for example. And if I just want to go safe, I think Arteta is the one to pick, even over Iraola, for example. At least I've got Semenyo to cover Bournemouth, although it's not to the same level as going for the manager, of course. And I think Bournemouth can get a victory against Wolves, but they've got a pretty poor home record against them. Their last victory against Wolves in a home match was back in 2015 in the Championship, but you would probably favour them to do so this time round. And Arteta against West Ham, 11 goals scored in the last 2 games against the Hammers. I'd be very surprised if they can get 4 or 5 goals in this match with that attacking line of Sterling, Trossard and Nwaneri. Perhaps even Merino starts up front from the very beginning. But with my 2 forwards, you can see Chris Wood and Isak do face each other, and it was Chris Wood scoring a hat-trick in the last St James's Park encounter, but I think Isak is probably the more likely of the two to get a big return. Ultimately, they're both in my team, and they remain 2 of the best forwards in Fantasy Premier League. And he did get a double-digit haul in the City ground, actually, earlier this season with a goal and an assist. And that was kind of the beginning of Isak's brilliant run. He did blank a few times afterwards, and then he started that 8-game-in-a-row scoring streak. And he is probably the second best striker in the Premier League overall. As for my bench, it doesn't look particularly great. I'll be the first one to admit it. I've got Valdemarsson, Mykolenko, Colwill, and Unai. The only benching dilemma I really have is Mykolenko. I think he could start over a Morgan Rogers this week, or perhaps Veltman, but I'm keeping him first on my bench right now, and I did go for a 2-0 Everton win, so that could be a big mistake waiting to happen. But with the captaincy, yes, I'm playing it very boring, and I should be a bit more adventurous, but Mohamed Salah takes the armband for now, and Isak is the vice-captain. If I had Justin Kluivert, I would really consider going for him as my primary captain. And you might be wondering, why not Semenyo? I'm not as keen on him for the captaincy because Kluivert is on penalties and he's also been more dangerous and consistent, I would argue, over the last couple of months compared to Semenyo, although a lot of those returns have been penalties for the Dutchman. So that is probably an element of over-reliance on them, or maybe you could say a lot of luck has to be involved. And the last time Wolves played Bournemouth, it was a hat-trick of penalties for Justin Kluivert, and that's why these takers can be so important. You can't captain an assistant manager, of course. All of those rules are broken down in my recent videos and podcasts, particularly the assistant manager live stream and my chip strategy guide. But let's now talk about the expected points very briefly, which is actually according to Fantasy Football Hub. So Arteta is top for Gameweek 26 with 8.6, but in second place is Oliver Glasner at 8.3. Let me know down in the comment section below, who do you prefer between Arteta, Glasner, Iraola, or any other manager in Gameweek 26? Maybe you're fancying McKenna or Ruud van Nistelrooy, maybe just sticking with Arne slot, or the manager you have, that could be David Moyes or Unai Emery, as I mentioned before. And in terms of my starting 11, they pretty much agree with everything except Mykolenko versus Veltman. So they do suggest starting the Ukrainian left back, and that's something I might end up doing in the end. But with the captaincy, they think Salah is the top scorer from my 50-man squad, and Isak deserves the vice-captaincy over anybody else. It's worth using websites like fpl.team to visualize future game weeks, compare different transfer plans, and also chip strategies. So in Game Week 27, if I decide to make one managerial transfer in Game Week 26, go for Arteta, I would still have one free transfer going into the next game week, and I would have 3.6 million in the bank. So that gives me so many opportunities to upgrade in every single position. I would leave my goalkeeper as it is, despite some tough games like Arsenal, Man City over the next 3 game weeks. My defensive line is fairly decent for the upcoming game week in 27, but having said that, Colwill and Veltman are still pretty terrible assets overall, and they are expendable, and that's where Gabriel could come in very handy. In the midfield, I think Rogers would be the one to make way. I'm fairly happy keeping Salah, Mbeumo, Palmer and Semenyo, and I might even captain Palmer over Salah next week, although it is still very risky because Salah has a home game, albeit against Newcastle, and last time out it was an Egyptian scoring a hat-trick against the Toons. So could Salah match that? He certainly can. Chris Wood and Isak both have tough games on paper against the 2 best teams in the league in Arsenal and Liverpool, but I still think they can get a return there and bonus points, especially in the case of Chris Wood. My bench would have the same kind of usual suspects: Valdemarsson, Mykolenko, Veltman and Unai. So that's where the temptation to make a player transfer in Gameweek 26 would stem from. And by the end of Gameweek 26, the funds from the assistant manager would go back into my squad and I can reinvest it in each position. So in the defensive line, Gabriel would be the #1 target. In the midfield, Rodgers to, let's say, a Matoma, Kluivert, Dango Ouattara, or a more expensive midfielder is on the cards, and Matheus Cunha could replace Ndai quite easily. And even by making all of those upgrades, I would still maybe have a little bit of money left in the bank. It all depends on my choice of midfielder, but certainly getting Gabriel for a Colwill or Veltman would leave me slightly short of funds, you could say, or at least it would eat up a chunk of my budget and money in the bank. But it's not really too much of an issue. As you can see, 3.6 million is a lot of money to spend, and I think I can make good use of it going into blank Gameweek 29 and beyond. That wraps up another team selection video for FPL, this time out of Gameweek 26. If you have any suggestions or thoughts about my transfer plans and what you think is best for my setup, then let me know down in the comment section below. And if you've also got any issues or maybe conundrums you want to solve, the FPL community will be there to assist you, as will I, not just in the comment section of this video, but also in tomorrow's deadline stream. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that notification bell in the process. Our aim is to get this to the 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 33,000 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and in the case of Blue Sky, it's FPL Dylan. And also check out my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 26 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you tomorrow for that deadline stream.